Hi Twin Flames, it's Lisa here. So I want to explain a little bit more about what ego death is and why it's important if you are on this twin flame journey. So for many of us, when we meet our twins, we do get what is known as soul activation. And this can plummet us into what is known as ego death. And ego death is not something you can easily identify with unless you have been through it yourself. It is an incredibly unique experience, and there is quite honestly nothing like it. So when I met my twin flame and had soul activation or soul recognition on about the third time I met my twin, I was plummeted into ego death. Now, ego death will affect everybody differently, but typically it's not a very pleasant time. Ego death is a time of utter despair. It's when your whole identity starts to crash and life can feel very meaningless and your whole world can literally start to crumble. So what happens is the ego has constructed like an identity through all our programming and conditioning. We have formed an identity of ourselves, or like a character. So I would be like the character of Lisa and everything that I knew about myself to that point in my life. But when we have ego death, our identity kind of comes up to be questioned. We start to look at all of the decisions that we've made in our life. We start to look at everything that we've done in our life so far, and we start to question its meaning, and we start to question what is our purpose, what are we doing here? And pretty much everything to do with that character that you have been playing may start to feel very unfamiliar and very foreign. So the ego death happens so that the ego can degrade, it can get smaller, and this is what happens during a spiritual awakening. So meeting your twin flame has activated that spiritual awakening. It has plummeted you into ego death. And ego death can last different lengths of time for everybody. I've had 3 ego deaths. My first one was by far the worst. It lasted for about 6 months, where I was just in, pretty much identity crises. I was having obsessive thinking about my twin, and nothing in my world was making sense. So it's quite a scary time. It can be a lonely time. You will realize that not many people understand what you're going through. Many of them will think that you have depression or mental health problems, but you are in fact waking up. You are in fact going through an awakening, and to wake up, to become conscious, you have to experience an ego death. So after the ego death, you start to live a little more consciously. After the ego death, you may start to make some big changes to your life. So during the ego death, you may have been shown that the job that you've been doing is not really meaningful, or that perhaps you have outgrown it. For other people, they may suddenly realize that the relationship that they've been in has run its course and is no longer giving them any soul expansion at all. It could be, simply what you've done with your life so far just does not feel satisfying. And so an ego death can really shake things up. It can really make you question every single decision you have made to this point in your life. So after the ego death, you will start to live more consciously. You will start to live less from ego and less from mind, and more from your soul energy, more from who you truly are. So we really are a soul, but our mind and our ego sometimes covers up that soul energy. So as the mind and the ego dissolve and get smaller and more quiet, we can start to listen to our soul energy. We can start to listen to who we truly are and figure out what things we need to shift around so that we can start to live in full alignment with our true self. So after ego death, this is when, I call it an identity crisis, because everything that you may have been doing, you suddenly don't understand why you've been doing it. You may have been functioning in the matrix on autopilot. You may have been working a job that, really you probably didn't like, but you just did it for the money. There's so many things that can happen during an ego death that force you to have to stop and take a really long, hard look at your life. So in the area of your love life, you may have realized that everything that you thought love was has not been accurate. Everything that you thought a relationship should be has been, not quite true love, not quite correct. So you are forced to kind of start to move your beliefs and your programming around so you can start to become your true self. So this is where you have to alter everything in your 3D life to fit this new awakened version of yourself. And that sounds easier than it is. It can be very scary. You can be very emotional. You can be crying a lot because you are letting go of lots of things in your life. If you are on this twin flame journey, this is a time where you start to get bombarded with signs and synchronicities. You start to realize that you may have met your twin flame. You may start to realize there's a higher power, and everything as you knew it just starts to really get shaken up. So for me, my ego death was a very lonely and scary time, but the good news about an ego death is that afterwards, things feel much clearer, things feel much better. So it's kind of like clearing out the old version of you, or clearing out the parts of your life that were kind of just stagnant, and making room for bringing in the new parts of your life that really do provide meaning and fulfillment. So anyone going through an ego death would never really wish that on anybody else. They are incredibly challenging, but they are incredibly rewarding. So after an ego death, you stop functioning from your mind so much. You stop functioning from the stories and the programming, and you really start to ascend, and you really start to become conscious living. And there's no greater gift. So when you're more conscious of what you're doing, when you're more conscious of the decisions and actions you're taking, then you can intentionally start to create a more purposeful and more beautiful life. So consciousness is a gift, but unfortunately we do have to go through that ego death to start to truly awaken and to start to put our consciousness into practice. So other ego deaths can last just a few hours, some a few days. It will be different for everybody. But if you are going through an ego death, my best advice to you is to try to take some solitude. Try to spend some time alone. Try to feel all of the feelings that come up from having an ego death, and try to have faith that it will pass and you will come out of the ego death a much more awakened and conscious being who can then start to create a more meaningful and wonderful life. Thank you for listening, and God bless.